Ruth, beginning at chapter 3 and verse 1. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whom those young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself. Put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." The word of God to the people of God. Thanks be to God. Thank you. You may be seated. Would you bow your hearts with me, please, for just a moment? Blessed Father, in these next few moments, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable unto you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Anybody feel uncomfortable? A little bit? Yeah? Did that on purpose. This week we will continue our exploration of the book of Ruth, this elegantly crafted tale put together by the Holy Spirit to teach us about the concept of redemption. One of the ideas we focused on last week was the Jew-Gentile dichotomy and the very Jewish nature of the book. That is going to come even more sharply into focus as we read chapters 3 and 4. But I want you to feel confused. I do. I want you to feel just a little bit uncomfortable. I want you to try throughout chapter 3 and 4 to see things from Ruth's perspective. She's been given these instructions she doesn't understand, and because of her love for her mother-in-law, she follows them. Now, let's keep that in mind as we look briefly at the text. Just a recap of what happened last week on Frankfort UMC's production of Ruth, the Romance of Redemption. Redemption. We had a cast of actors here to help us remember the characters in our story. And in our production, the part of Naomi is played by Lisa Kudrow, better known as Phoebe from Friends. Playing Naomi's husband, who passes away at the beginning of the story, but is still an important character, we have Harrison Ford as in the role of Elimelech. Playing the title role in the story is Wonder Woman herself, Gal Gadot, as Ruth. And playing in the role of Boaz, the wealthy landowner in whose field Ruth gleans, we have Daniel Radcliffe of Harry Potter fame. Now, I must confess, Radcliffe is actually a bit older. Boaz is actually a good bit older than Ruth is. So Daniel will have to be aged, but we can take care of that in our makeup department. We're also going to meet a new character today, and we'll deal with his casting when we get there. But last week, in chapter 1, we had the setup of the story. Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, leave Israel during a famine. They have 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. While in Moab, Mahlon and Chilion both take foreign wives. Then the boys died, leaving Naomi with her 2 daughters-in-law, but with no men in the house. One of the women, Orpah, leaves, but the other, Ruth, swears to stay with Naomi, and the 2 of them return to Israel. Now in chapter 2, Ruth goes out into the fields at the harvest time to glean behind the workers, a process established by Moses to take care of the widows and the orphans. Eventually, she finds herself in the field of Boaz, who takes a liking to her because of both her beauty and her strength of character. Boaz makes sure that Ruth is protected and taken care of by the workers, and when Ruth returns to Naomi and tells her what has happened, Naomi begins to concoct a plan. Now, it's important at this point to realize that Naomi and Boaz never meet in the entire story. At no point in either before this or after do we have any interaction between Lisa Kudrow and Daniel Radcliffe, Naomi and Boaz. Why is that important? Hold that in your mind. In verse 19 of chapter 2, we get a big payoff. Ruth is telling Naomi about her day gleaning in the field, and she says, "The man's name with whom I worked today is Boaz." Now, you can all just see Lisa Kudrow, Naomi's eyes light up when Ruth says the name Boaz. Because in verse 20, Naomi replies, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "This man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." Pay special attention to what Naomi says here. May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. And also, so who's Naomi talking about here? Naomi is obviously talking about her own husband, Elimelech. Elimelech died at the beginning of the story and is played, of course, by Harrison Ford, but only in flashbacks. Now, what on earth is the relationship between Boaz and Elimelech? And further, why does Naomi call Boaz, quote, one of our redeemers? Naomi understands because she's Jewish. She grew up in that culture. She knows the customs and the history. Ruth, a Gentile like you and me, does not. It would be like having a friend come and visit you from a faraway place, not like Minnesota, but like Spain or Israel. Well, what a concept. And hearing an old voice coming from your radio saying, "Hey kids, what time is it?" Does anybody know what time it is? It's howdy doody time. How do you know that? Because you're an American, right? Because you're an American with a memory from a certain era of time. Or maybe for those of us a little bit younger, hearing a very calm and happy voice talking about happy little trees and happy little accidents. Right? See? You all have a name in your head. You probably have a face and you see the afro. I haven't told you who I'm talking about, but you know. Those who recognize that know we're talking about the very quiet painter, Bob Ross. And we see him on his PBS show painting landscapes and making it all seem so stinking easy. Or how about this? If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Right? These are bits of our cultural memory. These are milestones or highlights in our history. These are things that unite us or things that stand out to our collective sensibilities. Naomi and Boaz are both of the same culture. They're Jewish. Ruth is not. So watch what happens next. Beginning at chapter 1 and verse 5, our primary text, that Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" Rest? What's that? "Is not Boaz, our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself. Go and put your cloak and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And we're all a little uncomfortable. We're all a little uncomfortable, just like when you opened your eyes and saw me wearing the talit, right? But how does Ruth reply? She says, "All that you say, I will do." I don't get it. I don't know. I don't understand. It's beyond me. Whatever. I'm going to do what you tell me to do, and I'm going to trust that you have my best intentions at heart. Chapter 3, beginning at verse 6. So she went down to the threshing floor, and she did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drank, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Now, very briefly, the threshing floor is where they would thresh. See? But they would take their grain and harvest it. They would put it all on the threshing floor. And then they would take forks or shovels and toss it into the air. And the wind would blow and it would pick up the grain, and the heavier wheat would fall faster than the light barley. And if you do it right, this thing keeps sliding off of me. I don't know how to do that. If you do it right, you end up with two piles. One pile of wheat and one pile of barley. And that's how you separate the barley from the wheat. You remember when Jesus is talking about tares being planted among the wheat, and they say, should we go and harvest the tares? And he says, no, you might pull up the... Well, threshing is how you separate the good stuff from the bad stuff. When you're going through times in your life of threshing, remember that the Lord is separating you from the bad things in your life, and that He's doing it in a very natural and predictable way. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. Now, it is true that feet is a euphemism in the Hebrew culture for the unmentionable parts of the lower body. But it also means feet. I didn't think I'd get my leg up that high. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Now, doubtless, Ruth has been told what to do by Naomi. She's been told what to say by Naomi, right? Because many of us here are Gentiles. All of us here are Gentiles like Ruth is. And many of us have no idea what she's saying when she says, "Spread your wings over me." Some translations have "the corner of your garment." The King James Version, rather unfortunately, translates this phrase as "your skirt." And so a lot of pastors and teachers have gotten a very wrong idea about this passage. They assume that Ruth sneaks up on Boaz in the middle of the night and propositions him for relations. I've even seen this taught as a non-consensual encounter between the two. Dearly beloved, nothing could be further from the truth. Let's look at Ezekiel chapter 16, beginning at verse 8. The Lord is speaking. He says, "When I passed by you again and I saw you, behold, you were at the age for love, and I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your nakedness. I made my vow to you and entered into a covenant with you, declares the Lord, and you became mine." This is God, remember, speaking to Israel. And in that context, it starts to make a little bit more sense. God isn't going to... no. What he does do is take Israel into his house or under his wing or into his arms of protection. And that is what Ruth is asking here. It's a very subtle way of asking for his protection and for his love. By the way, we see this famous motif played out with another fantastic Jewish teacher in Matthew chapter 9, beginning at verse 20. "And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, 'If I only touch his garment, I will be made well.' Jesus turned and seeing her said, 'Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well.' And instantly the woman was made well." She knows that Jesus is called the Son of God. So by touching the edge of his garment, she's appealing to his Father. She's appealing to his house. It's going to make a little more sense here in just a minute. That's why she's so insistent on touching the hem of his garment. One more point on this. In 1 Samuel chapter 24, David finds King Saul, who is pursuing him, and Saul is alone in a cave resting. David sneaks up behind Saul and cuts off the corner of his garment. Why? Because Jewish houses would weave their identity into their garments, into their shawls, into their robes, into their cloaks. Anyone here Scottish, of Scottish descent? Okay, excellent, good, yeah. What is a kilt? A kilt is a skirt that Scottish men wear, but you can tell what clan or what family a man belongs to by the pattern weaved into his kilt, right? It's the same thing with Jewish families. What is on the edge of your garment, what is on the hem of your garment, is your family's signature. And in an illiterate society, if you needed to sign a document, you could take the hem of your garment and press it into a clay tablet. And then anyone who saw that clay tablet would look at the way the fibers were woven together, and they would know what family you were from. So David, the woman with the issue of blood, and Ruth are all here in these three stories appealing to the house of the person they are addressing. David appealing to the house of Saul. The woman with the issue of blood appealing to the house of Christ. Ruth appealing to the house of Boaz, appealing to his family line. Now moving on, Boaz responds in chapter 3 and verse 10. May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter, and may you have made this last kindness greater than the first, and that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. This is another proof that she's not propositioning him for something unworthy. Now, it's true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down to the morning. Now, we have introduced another character to the story, a nearer kinsman, someone with a better legal claim to both the fields of Elimelech and the hand of Ruth. And we all think that Gal Gadot and Daniel Radcliffe would be great together, right? They're just such a cute couple. Well, who is this nearer kinsman? This kinsman has a better right to redeem Elimelech's land. And sticking with our casting protocol of casting only Jewish actors, our nearer kinsman will be played by Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito has a claim to Ruth's land. He has a claim to marry her and to raise up children with her in the name of her dead husband. This is the law of levirate marriage. This is how God made sure that the land that was inherited by the people would stay in the family, right? Ruth chapter 3 and verse 14. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you were wearing and hold it out. And she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley. And he put it on her. He puts 6 measures of barley into her garment. And she goes back to her mother-in-law. What on earth is that about? And then when Naomi sees the 6 measures of barley, she replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. What? What clue does Naomi have that Boaz won't stop until the matter is settled and make sure the matter is settled today? Well, of course, it's the 6 measures of barley. Because in 6 days, the Lord created the heavens and the earth. So 6 is the number of working, but 7, the 7th day, is the number of completion. Boaz gives Ruth 6 measures of barley. He's saying, we're not done here. The 7th day God rested, but Boaz is here saying he will not rest until the matter is settled, and he will make sure it is settled this very day. Ruth chapter 4 and verse 1. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. The gate of the city was like the town hall. It's where people met. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. Danny DeVito rides by. Danny has to ride a donkey. He's not a horse guy. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Now, 10 men is a quorum. 10 men in Hebrew is called a minyan. I have a friend, a Jewish friend, who loves the little yellow minions, right, with the eyes, the movie. They're always making trouble. And because he loves the pun, the minions. And so he came to speak at my church back in 2015. And I bought him 10 of those little guys. And I sat him down, and they were a minion. Anyway. So the elders of the city, sit down, and then he said to the Redeemer, Boaz, Daniel Radcliffe, says to the nearer kinsman, says to Danny DeVito, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech, so I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, right? You can just see this Jewish merchant wheeling and dealing. If you will redeem it, but if you will not, tell me that I may know. For there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. We're all excited about this. This is pretty great, right? It's all going swimmingly, and then Danny DeVito says, I will redeem it. I'll buy it. And then Boaz says, but, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also require Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. And the Redeemer said, I can't do that, lest I impair my own inheritance. You take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. This is an odd custom, right? But it's an illiterate society. Why would you exchange shoes as a sign of a covenant? Deuteronomy chapter 29, beginning at verse 5, I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes have not worn out on you, and your sandals have not worn off your feet. Moses leads the people out of slavery in Egypt. They go straight to the mountain, then they go straight to the promised land, then they mess up, and God sends them back out into the desert for 39 years. Everyone who was a slave in Egypt dies in the desert, and their children go back into the land of Canaan. Everyone except for Joshua and Caleb dies in the desert. They go into the land of Canaan. Their children go into the land of Canaan, but they didn't need to make any new shoes. All of their shoes lasted for 40 years. Now, some of you ladies are really excited at that prospect. Because don't you hate it when your shoes wear out, especially that pair that make you look so good? But the Lord kept their shoes from wearing out for 40 years. And so because of this, the Hebrew people take the idea of shoes to be a symbol of a covenant. Now, I am running pretty long here, so let's speed up through the end. Boaz marries Ruth. The land that belongs to Elimelech passes to Ruth's firstborn child, a boy named Obed. Now, I'm skipping a lot here that I could preach a whole other sermon on, but we'll just run through this. Does anyone remember from chapter 1 what piece of land belonged to Elimelech? It was in the city of Bethlehem. Right? We talked about this. We said, our Christian 10 senses are tingling now because we hear the word Bethlehem. Obed, Ruth's son, fathers Jesse. Jesse fathers David. David, the king, is the great-grandson of Ruth, the Gentile Moabitess, who through her love of her mother-in-law and through her willingness to do what she was asked, even when she didn't understand, enters into the line of the kings of Israel. Not only that, she becomes the grandmother of the Messiah, Christ, who is born of David. Now, most of the time, we don't know what's going on. We do our best to try to stay informed on whatever bits of information we can. We try to pay attention to those things that are interesting to us, but we don't understand. There's a lot we don't know. And like Ruth, sometimes we have to step out in faith, trusting our Naomi because we have good reason to trust her. We step out in faith, trusting what Christ has told us and doing as he bid, even when we do not understand. And because of our willingness to do, even in the face of our lack of understanding, we can change the world. One final point, and I'll close with this. Yes, this story actually happened. Yes, this is history. Yes, this is real. But it's also a beautiful prophecy. Naomi, the Jewish mother-in-law, is Israel. Ruth is the Gentile church. That's us. That's you and me. Boaz is the kinsman redeemer, a picture of Christ. When we learn about Boaz, we learn about Jesus. Through our Bible, which is written almost entirely by Jewish authors, but in the end, Naomi never meets Boaz in the story until Ruth introduces her. And I find that beautiful. Now, on your own time, you can go back and reread the whole story of Ruth with that idea in mind. Naomi is Israel. Ruth is a picture of the Gentile church. Boaz is the Christ. And you'll find a whole nother layer of meaning to the text. But now, let's bow our hearts in prayer.